James had always been a curious explorer. It was his job to visit far-off planets, map their terrains, and gather any information that might help humanity understand the vast universe. He had been to many strange and beautiful places, but nothing quite like this. The planet he was now on was lush with green forests, towering trees, and a sky that was deeper than any blue he had seen before. However, there was something odd about this planet, something that felt both welcoming and strange. At the same time, he had been walking for hours, trying to find shelter before nightfall. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the ground. The forest was alive with the sound of creatures he couldn't name, and the air smelled sweet with the scent of flowers he had never seen before. James knew he had to find shelter soon. As a trained explorer, he had learned the hard way that surviving in alien worlds required both skill and luck. After a while, he stumbled upon a small village, hidden between the trees. The buildings were made of natural materials, like wood and leaves, blending perfectly with the surrounding forest. It looked peaceful, almost like a place where time had stopped, as though the world hadn't touched this little corner of the planet. There were no signs of technology, no lights, no noise, just a quiet, serene atmosphere. But something about it made James uneasy. Maybe it was the silence, or maybe it was the way the buildings seemed to watch him, their windows dark and empty. As he walked further into the village, he saw a small hut at the edge of a clearing. The door was slightly open, and smoke was rising from the small chimney. It was the only sign of life in the village. His curiosity got the better of him, and he approached cautiously, calling out in the universal language of explorers. "Hello! Anyone there?" To his surprise, the door creaked open further, and a figure stepped out. It was a young alien girl, unlike any creature he had seen before. Her skin was a soft shade of pale blue, glowing faintly in the dim light of the forest. Her features were delicate, her eyes large and dark, but not in a way that was threatening, more in a way that was curious and innocent. She wore simple clothing, woven from what appeared to be natural fibers, and her hair flowed like strands of silk, darker than her skin, cascading down her shoulders. James froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. Was she a native of this planet, a local, or perhaps someone else lost like him? The girl smiled at him, her teeth small and white, and the sight of her smile eased some of his tension. She spoke in a language he didn't understand at first, but he recognized a few familiar words. She paused and spoke again, this time slower. "Come in. Warm yourself by the fire." Her voice was soft, melodic even, and her tone was inviting. James hesitated. He was alone, far from his crew, and had no idea if this was a trap. But the cold was biting, and he didn't have much choice. He decided to trust her, at least for now. He stepped inside the hut, and as he crossed the threshold, a warm, comforting feeling washed over him. The inside was cozy, with a fire crackling in a small hearth at the center of the room. The walls were lined with shelves filled with strange objects that James couldn't quite identify. Some were small, delicate carvings. Others looked like pieces of machinery, but all of them were made of materials he didn't recognize. The air smelled of wood, herbs, and something sweet, almost like honey. The girl gestured for him to sit by the fire, and James took a seat on the large cushion-like chair she pointed to. She moved gracefully around the room, collecting what appeared to be some sort of stew from a pot hanging over the fire. "I made food. You must be hungry," she said, offering him a bowl. James accepted it, still unsure of what to think of her. She was friendly, too friendly perhaps. It didn't seem normal for someone to be this welcoming, especially on an unknown planet. But the food smelled delicious, and after a long day of exploring, he couldn't resist. He took a bite. The stew was rich and flavorful, unlike anything he had ever tasted. There were strange herbs and spices in it, giving it a complex taste that made his stomach rumble with satisfaction. As he ate, he glanced around the room, trying to make sense of everything. The girl watched him closely, her eyes never leaving his face. "You are human," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "I have seen pictures of your kind." James looked at her in surprise. "Pictures?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. "Where did you see them?" Her smile faded slightly, and she sat down opposite him, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "I have seen many things. Things I shouldn't have. But it's my job to watch." "Watch?" James repeated. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she seemed to lose herself in thought for a moment before meeting his gaze. "Again. Humans are very interesting," she said quietly. "You come from a place far away, don't you? A place with many stars, many worlds." James didn't respond immediately. It wasn't uncommon for alien species to know about humans, especially as space travel had expanded, but something about the way she said it felt different, almost, like she had been waiting for him. Before he could ask any more questions, she stood up and walked over to one of the shelves. She returned with a small object in her hands, something shiny and metallic. It looked like a device, a piece of technology, but it wasn't anything he recognized. "This is mine," she said, holding it out to him. "I found it long ago, and I have learned to use it. It's important." James felt a chill run down his spine. The device she was holding was too advanced for someone from this planet. That much he was sure of. He wondered if it was something that could help him find his way off this planet. But the girl wasn't finished. She stared at him with those large, dark eyes, her smile returning. "You'll stay here tonight," she said softly. "The night is cold, and you can't go out there alone." James looked at her, conflicted. He knew he couldn't afford to stay long, but there was something oddly comforting about her presence. It was tempting, too tempting. Something about her seemed different from everyone he had met before, and perhaps for now it was okay to trust her. "All right," he finally said. "I'll stay." And so he sat by the fire, unsure of what the night would bring, but certain that his encounter with this alien girl was only the beginning of something much bigger. As the fire crackled in the hearth, James couldn't help but feel the weight of the strange situation he found himself in. The alien girl, who had welcomed him into her hut with a warmth that seemed out of place on this distant planet, moved quietly around the room. Her name was still unknown to him, but something told him that asking would only lead to more questions. She returned to the fire with a small cloth, wiping her hands as she sat down across from him. Her gaze was steady, her eyes studying him, in a way that made him feel both seen and unknown at the same time. There was a quiet confidence in her presence, but something about it felt unsettling. James leaned back slightly in his chair, trying to relax. The warmth from the fire made him feel sleepy, but his mind was still racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this girl than what she had let on. She knew far too much about humanity for someone who appeared so young and innocent. When she spoke again, her voice seemed different, more calculated, as if she were measuring her words carefully. "Tell me about your world," she said, her tone soft but eager. "You come from a place far away, don't you? With cities and ships that fly in the sky?" James paused, not sure how to respond. He had heard many stories of alien species being curious about Earth, but this felt different. It wasn't just a question out of innocent curiosity. She seemed to be fishing for something, though he couldn't figure out what. Still, he decided to indulge her. "Yeah, Earth is a bit like that," he said, cautiously. "We have cities, big ones, and we've got ships that travel through space too." The girl nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. "I know. I've seen them," the ships, the people. I know a lot more than you think." James felt a chill run down his spine. He was beginning to realize that this girl wasn't as innocent as she seemed. Her words were too precise, too knowing. It was as if she had been studying humans for a long time. But why? What did she want with him? Before he could ask, she continued, her voice softer now. "Do you know what it's like to be watched all the time? To always feel like you are being observed but never truly seen?" James furrowed his brow. "No, I don't know what that feels like," he replied, confused. The girl stood up abruptly, walking toward the far corner of the room. She was quick, like a predator moving through the shadows. James tensed, instinctively reaching for the small weapon he kept at his side, but she didn't seem threatening. She returned with a small metal object in her hands, a device that looked both ancient and modern at the same time. She placed it on the table between them, her fingers brushing over it with a sort of reverence. "This is the key," she said, her voice quiet. "The key to everything." James didn't understand. What could it be the key to? The device was unfamiliar, but it had an aura of importance about it, something that seemed to resonate with his own sense of curiosity. She looked up at him, her expression serious. "You are not the first human to visit this planet, James. There have been others, many others, and each one of them has left something behind, a piece of themselves. This device, it's connected to them." James felt a sharp pang of unease. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Why are you telling me this?" She sat down again, her face unreadable. "Because you are here. Because you have come. And now, you are part of it. Part of the story of this planet." James felt his heart race. This was no ordinary encounter. There was something far deeper at play here, something that had been going on long before his arrival. But what was it? And why had she brought him here? "You're a part of something much bigger than yourself, James," she said, her eyes piercing through him. "You have no idea what you've walked into." James opened his mouth to ask more questions, but before he could speak, the ground beneath them suddenly trembled. The fire in the hearth flickered as if disturbed by some invisible force. The girl's eyes widened in alarm, and she quickly stood up, rushing to the window. "Quick," she said, her voice sharp. "They're coming!" James didn't need to ask who she meant. He grabbed his gear, his instincts kicking in. The sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. Footsteps that were too heavy, too purposeful to belong to any ordinary being. The girl turned to him, her face tight with urgency. "You need to hide. Now." "Who's coming?" James demanded, his heart racing. But she didn't answer. Instead, she rushed to the back of the hut and began pulling at a section of the wall. It moved aside with a soft hiss, revealing a narrow tunnel. "Hide," she repeated, pushing him toward the opening. "Do it now." James hesitated for a moment, looking at her. Her expression was no longer that of the innocent girl who had invited him in for food and shelter. It was the face of someone who had seen too much, someone who knew things James wasn't prepared to understand. He could hear the pounding of footsteps now, closer. Without another word, he stepped into the tunnel. The girl closed the wall behind him with a soft click, and everything went dark. He crouched down, waiting, trying to steady his breathing. The tunnel was narrow and the air was thick with the scent of earth, but he didn't care about that. His mind raced, filled with questions that he had no answers for. What had just happened? What was this girl hiding? And who was coming for them? The sound of heavy boots outside grew louder, and he could feel the ground shaking under their weight. There was no turning back now. Whatever secrets the girl had kept from him were about to be revealed, whether he was ready for them or not. And as he listened to the sounds of the approaching strangers, James realized one thing with a sinking feeling in his chest. His encounter with this alien girl had only just begun. The real danger was only now starting to unfold. The air in the narrow tunnel was thick with the smell of damp earth. James crouched, his back pressed against the cool stone, as his mind raced with questions. What was going on? Who were the people outside? And why had the alien girl, whose kindness had seemed genuine just moments ago, suddenly turned so urgent? He heard the distant rhythmic sounds of boots hitting the ground, echoing through the tunnel. They were getting closer. The heavy footsteps belonged to someone or something that was determined, their pace quick and steady. James's heart began to race. Every muscle in his body was tense, ready to spring into action, but he had no idea what kind of action to take. His hand brushed against the wall of the tunnel, feeling the cool, uneven surface. He strained to hear the girl's movements, but the darkness swallowed every sound. She had pushed him into this tunnel with a quickness he had not expected. Had she known what was coming? Did she set him up? Or had she been caught off guard? Just as much as he was, minutes passed, and every second felt like an eternity. The distant footsteps grew louder, now accompanied by voices, low, rumbling growls that made his skin crawl. There was something unnatural about them, something that chilled him to the bone. Then, without warning, the tunnel's entryway shifted. The ground beneath James's feet trembled slightly, and the shadows seemed to deepen, thickening like smoke. The girl had sealed the entrance from the outside, but now it felt as if the very earth was closing in on him. His pulse quickened. The danger was drawing closer. He had no choice but to move forward. But he had no idea where the tunnel would lead, or if it would even provide a safe escape. Was it a trap? Had she been trying to protect him, or lead him into something far, darker? James silently crept through the tunnel, his footsteps muffled by the soft earth beneath him. The low voices from above grew louder, but still he could not make out their words. He pushed on, inching his way deeper into the tunnel. It seemed to stretch on forever, narrowing at times until he had to squeeze through tight spaces. Now and then, he would stop to listen for any sign of movement behind him. The further he went, the more he began to question everything. Who were these soldiers, and why had they come to the village? More importantly, why had the girl asked him? To hide? The answers were slipping further away with every step, and he had no way of knowing what awaited him at the end of the tunnel. Eventually, he reached a fork in the path. The tunnel split into two narrow corridors. One path led to the left, dark and silent. The other, to the right, had a faint glow coming from the end, like a distant light. He paused, considering his options. His instincts screamed at him to take the path with the light, but something about it felt wrong. Was it a trap, or was it a way out? He took a deep breath and chose the right path, moving toward the light. With every step, the air grew warmer, the glow ahead grew brighter, and soon, James found himself standing in front of a small, open chamber. The walls were rough stone, covered with alien symbols James didn't recognize. In the center of the room was a large, glowing crystal sitting on a pedestal. The crystal pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light, casting strange shadows across the chamber. James stepped closer, his curiosity piqued despite the growing unease in his stomach. The crystal seemed to hum, resonating with the very air around it. It felt alive, almost as if it was calling to him. "Don't touch it!" James spun around, startled. The voice was familiar, but it wasn't the girl's soft tone. This voice was cold, stern, and filled with an authority that sent a shiver down his spine. Standing in the doorway of the chamber was a figure, cloaked in shadow, his eyes glowing faintly as he watched James with an unreadable expression. "Who are you?" James demanded, his voice echoing in the stillness. He instinctively reached for his sidearm, though he knew it would do little against whatever this figure was. The figure stepped forward, revealing more of himself. He was tall, his skin a dark, metallic hue that reflected the light from the crystal. His armor was sleek, covering his entire body except for his face, which was partially obscured by a black helmet with glowing red eyes. "I am one of the soldiers you've been avoiding," the figure said, his voice calm, yet filled with menace. "But you don't need to worry about us. We're not the ones you need to fear." James took a step back, his pulse quickening. This wasn't just some random soldier. There was something deeply unsettling about the way he spoke. Something that made James feel like he was in the presence of an enemy far more dangerous than he had first thought. "Then who should I fear?" James asked, his voice laced with suspicion. The figure didn't respond right away. Instead, he motioned for James to look toward the back of the chamber. There, hidden in the shadows, stood the girl. Her face was no longer kind or innocent. Her eyes were wide with a mix of fear and determination, and her posture was tense, as if she was ready to bolt at any moment. James felt his heart drop. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The girl stepped forward, but instead of walking toward him, she moved toward the glowing crystal. Her hand hovered above it, and for a brief moment, James thought she might touch it. But she stopped, her fingers trembling as if something was holding her back. "It's not what you think," she said softly. "I wasn't trying to lead you into danger. But they're here for the crystal, for what it can do." James's confusion deepened. "The crystal? What do you mean?" The figure stepped forward again, his voice cutting through the tension. "This is not just a crystal. It's a power source, a weapon. And the girl," he nodded toward her, "is the key to unlocking its true potential." James stared at the girl, his mind reeling. "You're not just some innocent alien girl, are you?" he said, his voice tinged with disbelief. The girl lowered her gaze. "No, I'm not. But I didn't choose this. I didn't choose any of it." James's world was spinning. The girl, the soldiers, the crystal. It was all connected. And now, he had been pulled into something far beyond his understanding. He wasn't sure who he could trust anymore, but one thing was clear. The stakes had just been raised. The tension in the room was thick, like a storm hanging just above them, waiting to strike. James stood frozen, staring at the girl, whose expression had shifted from one of innocence to something far more complex. She was not the friendly alien he had first encountered, offering warmth and shelter. She had become someone much more dangerous, and the realization hit him harder than anything else. She wasn't just an innocent bystander in this strange alien world. She was part of something much bigger, and now he was a part of it too. The figure, this soldier in black armor, watched them both carefully, his glowing red eyes fixed on James as though he could read every thought running through his mind. The silence in the chamber was deafening, and the hum of the crystal seemed to fill the air, vibrating against his skin. "You're not the first human to stumble onto this planet," the soldier finally said, his voice cold but not unkind. "In fact, you're the latest in a long line of humans who have come here searching for something you couldn't understand." James looked between the girl and the soldier, confusion clouding his thoughts. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice tight. "What is this planet, and what does that crystal do?" The girl, her hand still hovering over the crystal, spoke softly, almost apologetically. "This planet, it's not like the others you've visited. It's not just a place for exploration or resources. It's something more. The crystal holds power, but not just any power." She paused, as if trying to find the right words. "It holds the key to control over the galaxy, over life itself." James's mind raced, his heart pounding. Control over life? What do you mean by that? His voice cracked, the weight of her words beginning to settle on him. Everything he thought he knew about the universe, about exploration, felt meaningless in that moment. This wasn't just a new world to be explored. It was something far darker. The soldier stepped closer, his voice echoing in the chamber. This crystal can manipulate energy, time. It can alter the very fabric of reality itself. But only someone who truly understands its power can unlock its full potential. The girl, he gestured to the alien girl. She is that someone. She is the key. James took a step back, his mind whirling with the implications. What do you mean she's the key? Is she part of the crystal? How is she connected to it? The girl looked down at her hands, her expression sorrowful. I didn't ask for this, she said quietly. I didn't ask to be part of this, but I've been trained, I've been conditioned. The crystal chose me, and now because of that I'm bound to it, to its power. James's stomach twisted as he realized the gravity of the situation. She wasn't a simple bystander caught in the middle of something she couldn't control. She was the one who held the power. She was the one who could decide what happened next. But the cost of that power, it was too much for anyone to bear alone. And what happens if she uses it? James asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The fear was there now, creeping into his thoughts. What happens if she unlocks its power? The soldier's gaze shifted toward the girl, his red eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. If she unlocks its true potential, she could reshape the universe. She could bend time, change history, even wipe out entire civilizations, all with a single thought. James felt his breath catch in his throat. This was no longer just about survival. This was about the fate of everything. The girl's hands trembled slightly as they hovered over the crystal, but she didn't touch it. Her eyes remained downcast, and her voice was almost a whisper. I've been trained to use it, to control it, but it's not easy. It takes more than just skill. It takes something deeper, something I'm not sure I have. The soldier moved toward her, his footsteps heavy but purposeful. You will learn. The power is in you, and you will unlock it, whether you want to or not. The only question is, who will you use it for? Will you use it to protect the galaxy from itself? Or will you let the darkness spread? James felt his chest tighten as the girl looked up at the soldier, her expression conflicted. She didn't want this power. She didn't want to be the key to something so dangerous. But the soldier's words were clear. She didn't have a choice. I can't, she said, her voice breaking. I don't want to be a weapon. I don't want to be a part of this war. I just want to live, to be free. The soldier's expression softened, but only for a moment. He stepped back, allowing her space. You may think you have a choice, but the crystal has already chosen. It chose you. Just as it chose others before you, you are the future, the galaxy's future, whether you like it or not. James felt a sharp pang in his chest. He wasn't just dealing with a battle of soldiers or alien factions. He was caught in the middle of something far bigger, a battle over power, over control, over the very fabric of reality itself. And the girl, the one he had thought was innocent, was the key to it all. He looked at her, his mind racing with conflicting thoughts. Is there any way out of this? He asked, his voice low. Can we stop it? Can you stop it? The girl met his gaze, her eyes filled with uncertainty. I don't know, she whispered. But if I don't, the consequences could be worse than anything. I could imagine. James felt the weight of the situation sink in. There was no simple escape. There was no easy solution. The girl was bound to this crystal, and the crystal was bound to the fate of the universe. Whether she liked it or not, Her destiny had been sealed long before they met. The soldier turned toward James, his gaze cold and unwavering. "You're caught in the middle now," he said, his voice hard. "You may not understand it yet, but you'll learn soon enough. Whether you want to help or not, the path ahead will change everything." James didn't know what to say. His mind was spinning, his thoughts a blur. All he knew was that he was no longer just an explorer. He was now part of something far beyond his control. And the girl, her fate, was tied to everything. As the girl reached for the crystal once more, the room seemed to hum with a power so intense it made James's skin prickle. He didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was certain: the universe would never be the same again. The weight of the situation hung heavy in the air as James stood there, watching the girl's fingers hover above the crystal. It pulsed softly, as if waiting for her touch. Every part of him screamed to stop her, to run, to escape, but the reality of their circumstances left him with no clear path. The soldier, watching with a cold, calculating gaze, was right. This wasn't something they could walk away from. It was bigger than them. The fate of the galaxy was tied to what happened next. The girl stood motionless, her hands trembling as she slowly, almost unwillingly, touched the crystal. The hum that filled the chamber grew louder, vibrating through the floor and into James's chest. It was as though the crystal had a life of its own, a power that could bend the very air around it. Her touch, so light and unsure, seemed to awaken something inside the crystal, and the light in the chamber brightened, casting strange shadows that danced across the stone walls. "I can't do this," the girl said, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't want this power. I never asked for it." The soldier took a step forward, his voice low but firm. "It doesn't matter if you want it. The crystal has already chosen, and once it has chosen, there's no turning back." James's heart raced. He could see the fear in the girl's eyes. This wasn't a choice for her. She had been trapped in a game far bigger than herself, a game she had no control over. He looked at her, his mind spinning, and the impulse to help her, to find a way out of this, grew stronger. "Listen to me," James said, taking a step toward the girl. "We can still find a way out. We can still stop this." The soldier's gaze snapped to James, his red eyes glowing brighter in the dim light. "You don't understand," the soldier said, his voice colder now. "This isn't something you can stop. You don't have the power. You never will." James clenched, his fists, his mind racing. He knew that standing here talking to the soldier wouldn't get them anywhere. But what else could he do? If they could stop this power from being unleashed, it had to be now. The longer they waited, the stronger the crystal's influence would grow. "We don't have to do what they want," James said, turning back to the girl. "You don't have to do this." She shook her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. "It's too late," she said softly. "I'm already part of it. The crystal's power is in me now. If I don't do this, I could destroy everything." James's heart sank. The situation was worse than he had thought. The crystal didn't just control power, it controlled the girl herself. Her fate was sealed. And if she didn't use the crystal, it would turn against her. He had to make a choice: stay and try to help, or leave and escape while they still could. But as he looked at her, the decision became clearer. He couldn't leave her behind. No matter how dangerous it was, he had to try. There had to be a way to stop the crystal from consuming her. He had to believe that. He took a deep breath. "We're not giving up. We'll find another way." Without waiting for a response, James turned to the soldier, his voice steady. "If you want to fight, then fight. But I'm not going to let this girl become a weapon. Not if I can stop it." The soldier's expression darkened, his gaze narrowing. "You are in no position to make demands," he said, stepping forward. "The crystal is more powerful than you can imagine. There is no escape from what's coming." Before James could react, the soldier moved with lightning speed. He grabbed the girl by the wrist and pulled her away from the crystal. "You will do as you're told. No more running," he growled, his grip tightening. James's blood ran cold. He couldn't let this happen, not to her, not to anyone. He rushed forward, grabbing the soldier's arm and pulling with all his strength. "Let her go!" he shouted. The soldier barely flinched, his eyes glowing brighter, and with a single twist, James was thrown backward into the stone wall. The impact rattled his bones, but he didn't stop. He pushed himself to his feet, fighting through the pain. The soldier moved toward the girl again, but this time James acted faster. He ran, and using all his weight, slammed into the soldier, knocking him off balance. The soldier staggered, but before he could recover, James reached for the glowing crystal. "No!" the soldier yelled, his voice filled with fury. With a swift motion, James grabbed the crystal. For a moment, nothing happened. The crystal hummed softly, but it didn't glow any brighter, nor did it seem to have any immediate effect. But then, the ground beneath their feet rumbled violently, shaking the walls. The crystal in James's hand pulsed, its glow intensifying until the entire room was bathed in bright, blinding light. A crackling energy filled the air, and James felt a sharp, cold sensation shoot through him, as if the crystal was reacting to his touch. He felt a force, something beyond his understanding, trying to draw him into it. The soldier recovered quickly and lunged at James, but the girl stepped forward, her hands shaking. "No, don't!" she cried. "You don't know what you're doing!" James held the crystal tight, fighting against the power that was beginning to overwhelm him. The light from the crystal surrounded him, blinding him momentarily. He could hear the girl's voice, distant and faint, but he couldn't let go. If he did, the power would be lost to them forever. The soldier moved forward again, but the girl reached out and grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "Stop! You have to stop! It's not for you to control anymore!" James could barely hear her over the roar of the energy pulsing from the crystal. The room was shaking, and the walls cracked under the force of the power. He had no idea what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure. He was caught in the middle of a battle he didn't fully understand, and no matter what, he couldn't let the crystal fall into the wrong hands. The soldier hesitated for a moment, then his face twisted with rage. "You think you can stop this? You're just a human," he snarled. James gritted his teeth. "I may be just a human," he said through clenched teeth, "but I'm not going to let you destroy everything." The room seemed to tremble with the energy from the crystal. Its light blazed brighter than ever, and the air felt thick with raw power. James gripped the crystal tightly, his heart racing as he felt the force of it coursing through his body. His hands were shaking, his body burning from the intensity, but he couldn't let go. He couldn't let the crystal fall into the wrong hands. The soldier, once so confident, now stood frozen, his eyes wide with shock and anger. The girl, her face pale and drawn, reached out toward James, her voice desperate. "James, please!" She cried, her voice trembling. "You don't understand. You don't know what you're dealing with." The energy in the room intensified, the crystal's light blinding, but James couldn't pull himself away from it. The power was overwhelming, like nothing he had ever felt before. It was as if the crystal was calling to him, pulling at something deep inside of him. It felt alive and hungry. The soldier's voice broke through the chaos. "Let it go! You don't have the strength to control it. It will consume you!" James didn't listen. He couldn't listen. He knew that if he released the crystal, everything would be lost. The fate of the girl, of the galaxy, was tied to it. But how could he use it? How could he control something so powerful, something so dangerous? The girl's voice was softer, now filled with a sadness that pierced through the storm of energy. "James, I never wanted this. I never wanted to be part of this power. It's not meant for me. It's not meant for anyone. Please, just put it down." James turned to look at her, his eyes filled with confusion and uncertainty. "But you said yourself that you were bound to it. You said the crystal chose you." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't choose this. It's controlling me. I'm just a tool for its power, and if I give in to it completely, it will destroy me. It will destroy everything." The soldier stepped forward, his voice cold and sharp. "You think you can stop it? You think you can control it? You can't. No one can." But James, despite the fear that gripped him, stood firm. His gaze never left the girl. "You don't have to do this. I don't know how, but we can find a way. We can stop it together." The crystal pulsed in his hands, as if responding to his words. It hummed with a power so strong it almost felt like it was alive, aware. The light flickered, and for a brief moment, the room seemed to grow still. The overwhelming energy that had filled the space seemed to pause, giving James a fleeting moment of clarity. It was then that he understood. He wasn't meant to control the crystal. The crystal wasn't meant to be controlled at all. It was a force of nature, something that couldn't be tamed or bent to anyone's will. The real question wasn't about controlling it, but about stopping it from destroying everything around it. "Stop fighting it," James said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We don't need to control it. We need to destroy it." The soldier's expression twisted with fury. "Destroy it? You can't destroy what you don't understand. The power it holds is beyond your comprehension." James didn't care about the soldier's words anymore. He had made his decision. He knew that if they didn't destroy the crystal, it would destroy them all. There was no other choice. The power inside it was too great, too dangerous to leave unchecked. Turning back to the girl, James's voice softened. "We can do this together. You don't have to be part of this anymore. We can free you from it." The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded slowly. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know if I can." "You can," James said firmly. "We both can." He raised the crystal higher, his hands shaking, and for the first time since he had picked it up, he felt something shift inside it. The power was still there, but it wasn't overwhelming him anymore. It was like a force pushing back against him, testing him, trying to make him give in. But he held on, his grip firm, not out of control, but out of purpose. The room trembled again, this time with less fury. The light from the crystal flickered, dimming just slightly, as if it were weakening in response to his determination. The soldier stepped back, his expression faltering. He had never seen anyone stand against the crystal like this before. James, focused, pushing all his will into the crystal. It hummed louder, then suddenly a crackling sound filled the air. The crystal's light flared brightly, blinding him for a moment. And then, just as quickly, the light faded. The crackling stopped. For a brief, deafening moment, there was complete silence. James opened his eyes, blinking against the sudden darkness. The crystal in his hands was no longer glowing. It was still there, but its power had been drained, its energy fading to nothing. The chamber, which had been shaking and alive with energy moments before, now felt still and quiet. The soldier stood in stunned silence, his eyes wide in disbelief. "What have you done?" he whispered. James took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. He had done it. He had destroyed the crystal's power, and with it, he had freed the girl from the burden that had been placed on her. The girl, still trembling, looked at James, her expression a mix of awe and relief. You did it. You really did it." James nodded, his heart still racing, but now with a sense of calm. "We did it." The soldier, seeing that the battle had been lost, turned and started to retreat. "You may have won today," he said, his voice bitter. "But this is far from over. There will be others. The power of the crystal will not be forgotten." James watched as the soldier disappeared into the shadows, but he wasn't afraid anymore. The battle was won, for now. The girl was free, and whatever came next, they would face it together. "We're not finished yet," James said softly, turning to the girl, "but we've taken the first step." She smiled, her eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I thought I would never be free, but now I have hope." James nodded, the weight of the future still ahead of them, but with a sense of hope that hadn't been there before. They had made it through the storm, and no matter what came next, they would face it together.